Good morning, chaps. So today's video is going to cover a rare and unusual vehicle, the Nacht X, an experimental heavy landing ship tracked vehicle from the early 1950s. I'll apologise for the less than perfect images, but it has taken a long time to track even these down. The Second World War saw a large shift in the interest of amphibious assaults, culminating in the largest amphibious invasion in the history of warfare, Operation Overlord. This led to a variety of vehicles being used, notably the American Ducks, as well as duplex drives fitted to tanks and the British Terrapin. These later vehicles were designed not as fighting vehicles per se, but as carriers to enable troops and, more importantly, supplies to be carried across stretches of water that regular vehicles could not traverse. However, they were very limited in the amount of cargo they could carry, and were prone to being swamped if disembarked from ships in anything but calm seas. The British did try to copy the more successful American LVT-4 in the form of the Neptune, which, despite taking on a successful American tried and tested hull, they managed to make somehow marginally worse. Neptune had a large loading bay able to take up to 4 tons, and so moving weapons like a 17-pounder gun and ammunition was possible, but even so, it still tended to get swamped. Although 2,000 were ordered, relatively few were ever made. Another previous experiment by Morris, known as the Argosy, based on the German Landwasserschlepper, also failed to achieve much. So with this rather stellar lack of success, you'd have thought the British would have adopted and used the US equipment. But nope, that's not how we do things in Blighty, by Jove. It's go big or go home. Thus in 1953 the Admiralty issued a tender to Vickers to build a very large landing ship tracked vehicle, able to take on some 14 tons of supplies, be launched from a ship's side, and traverse Modderswell, and upon hitting the shore continue inland where it could unload a truck, 2 armoured cars, or supplies, and take on some 22 stretchers of wounded infantry and bring them back to the ship. The vehicle, initially called the Naval Vehicle Landing Tracked Experimental, and a year later renamed the Naval Amphibious Craft Tracksperimental, or Nacht X, was built and tested. This colossal vehicle came in at 61 foot long, or 18 metres, with a width of 14 foot and a weight of 58 tons, and was built on a suspension similar to, but different from that of the Churchill tank, with 17 pairs of road wheels either side for 68 wheels in total. Power was provided by a Rolls-Royce 746 brake horsepower Meteor Mark 11 E1 engine, only one of 9 ever made, by Bobber's Mill of Nottingham, which gave it a land speed of around 12 miles an hour, or if at sea, a speed of 8 knots, or 9 miles an hour, via a large 4.5 foot, 4-bladed propeller mounted at the rear left-hand side. Vickers built the vehicle to the Admiralty specifications and sent her for her first test run down the River Tyne in Newcastle, where she was seen paddling up and down the river. Further refinements to the cabin were added, as well as bollards for tying up in docks, etc. To save weight, the hull itself was made of aluminium, while the running gear many fittings were made out of steel. So, did it work well? Of course not. Vickers made a total pig's ear of it. In April 1954, the Nacht X was sent to HMS Daedalus, just down from Haslar, to undergo sea trials and look for faults. The list was somewhat extensive. The first problem they came across was the large amount of steel and iron in her mix. As anyone knows, a naval vehicle can be dependent upon a compass to work, and when you surround a compass with a lot of iron fittings, it gave false readings. But this was just the start of her problems. Although she had an adequate speed in a straight line, due to the sheer mass underwater, any cross drift basically sent her off course, and the captain had to alter her line of bearing by some 35 degrees just to keep her nose facing the right way, and any crosswind would further add to the problems due to her large slab-like sides. While unloaded, she was able to handle up to 5 foot swell, but with a full load displacement, anything more than 3 foot tended to cause seepage over the sides, and due to her large frontal area, the sea spray made it near impossible for the crew to see where they were going, relying on their compass, which didn't work. The Nacht X had more problems in trying to get ashore, notably in that half the time she couldn't. This was down to a weak gearbox, and the disengagement of the propeller and the engagement of the tracks had to be just the right moment. If done too soon, her tracks would not be on the ground, and she would not be able to gain traction on the shoreline and would drift off while they tried to get the propeller to start back up. If done too late, after she was beached, the gearbox could not provide enough juice to get her moving up the beach slope. Thus it had to be a Goldilocks moment of disengaging one and engaging the other at split timing. It was realised that a sudden acceleration and floor it towards the shore worked, but this produced 6-foot flames from the exhaust. These flames would also blow back into the cargo compartment carrying munitions, which is considered somewhat undesirable. Should she manage to get onto the beach, the next problem lay with fine gravel and stones clogging up the road wheels, a problem some Churchill tanks had at Dieppe. With such small road wheels, the gravel and sand would effectively collect between the road wheels and prevent reverse, especially in trying to turn or swivel, where due to the 61 foot of length, the resistance was too high, and the additional weight of sand and gravel would weigh down the vehicle to the point it simply stalled. Track tensioning was also an issue. With such a large track length, it was very prone to simply throwing its tracks off. The next problem lay with her high profile of 16 foot. The cargo hold to shore level was 7 foot. This meant a ramp had to be engaged. However, the ramp needed to be much longer than desired to make the disembarkation angle suitable. If it was too steep, vehicles coming off the Narkt X would simply nosedive into the soft sand. So they made the ramp longer and had to hinge it in the middle, which took up valuable space. Thus, in order to unload the goods properly, a vehicle had to come down onto the sand to take the supplies, which counteracted the point of trying to get goods up a beach inaccessible to wheeled vehicles in the first place. Other serious issues of the Narkt X lay with the materials used and the metal chosen, all of which suffered severe corrosion to the point of disintegration after only a relatively short amount of time exposed to seawater. This would have required extensive maintenance, and if simply left with too much water around the amphibious craft, her wheels would fall off and then the hull would melt. Her large size was also a problem. If one can assume she was able to make it from the mothership without sinking, or getting lost and blown off course, or simply melting along the way, or setting herself on fire and exploding, before ultimately breaking down on the shoreline and throwing its tracks all over the beach, there was the problem of being 61 foot long, with a turning circle of 30 foot. Thus trying to manoeuvre the Chonker through any quaint seaside town without it becoming hopelessly wedged between buildings was problematic. With this vast list of faults, problems, and inability to do its job, normally considered the go-ahead for mass production within some military circles, the Admiralty actually chose not to produce the vehicle and cancelled the project. The fate of the Narkt X remains unknown. Well guys, I hope you liked that little chit-chat. If you did, give us a like and subscribe. Drop any comments below for more vehicles you want to see in the future. And until next time, toodle pip.